You and your mom look alike.
Oh, thank you.
And they look like sisters.
We kind of are.
I love it when people have the backgrounds behind them and someone walks up behind them, looks like they came through the background. Like Ernesto's, I guess that's his wife, that just walked up there and it's like, she just popped through the screen.
Oh, it's been interesting to watch the news, like with the correspondents, and you get a glimpse inside their homes. It's like, oh, Anderson Cooper's house looks like, you know, it's kind of fun.
Been surprised at how many are normal houses.
I know. I don't know what I expected, but.
Me either.
Hi, Brett.
Hey, Karen, will you send me your number on the chat?
Yes, I'm working on it right now.
Oh, awesome. Perfect.
Okay.
I just had a couple questions.
Okay.
Well, Pam, I think my intro is about 60 seconds. Do you want me to go ahead and dive in? That way they get a full hour of Amy instead of 59 minutes of her.
I think we have a few more people still coming online.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Okay, we still have a few more people coming on. But I was going to just make a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to introduce Amanda. I just want y'all to put on your calendars that next week we're going to do another wellness forum, but it'll be on Thursdays, and moving forward, the workplace wellness will be on a Thursday. And the next one, I believe, and Amanda can talk about a little bit more, will be on mental health. A lot of people battling with depression and stuff like that, having to work from home and changing jobs, losing jobs and stuff. So that's what that one will be on, I believe. But like I said, Amanda can talk a little bit more about that. And Alex Segal will be your host. And I'm not sure who the doctor is that's speaking. But I'll keep you posted. And of course, growth group next week will be online, and then talking with Pam. It looks like we're going to try to start doing growth group twice a month live at Kelly's. We just got to work it out with Kelly, and do Zoom meetings the 2 off weeks. But again, we'll keep you posted and try to incorporate the Zoom meetings into the live meetings. Also on June the 11th, which is in 2 weeks, we have our own Susie Solis, who is the female anchor for KRLD. She was already booked before all of this happened. I think it is probably amazing to hear from her on what it was like for them trying to get all the news out there with this pandemic going on. But she's also a very successful journalist. She was in television before she went into radio. She's an Emmy nominee for some documentaries that she's done. And she was a former female sports announcer. So we're very interested in hearing from her on her success in life, and also what it's been like for KRLD going through the pandemic. So be sure you put that on your calendar, June the 11th, Susie Solis, for our Women in Business Forum that we have coming up. And I think that's everything that we have right now. We will keep you posted. So right now I'm going to turn it over to our Amanda Brummett. Amanda, she already told you what she does, but she's also one of our lead volunteers. A lot of you guys don't know all the stuff she does behind the scenes. She is on our executive board of directors, and took over when we had to change staff. She took over the secretary role on the board, because I can't be the secretary and the president at the same time. Anyway, so she took that over, and she's done a great job. She has championed our Wellness in Coppell committee, and is responsible for all these great things that you see going on with our Working Well in Coppell program. And I'm going to turn it over to her. Thank you, Amanda, for everything you do, and it's all yours now.
Thanks, Ellie. So today, you guys are super fortunate. If you don't already know Amy Goddard, by the end of this, you will want to. Amy Goddard is a postural restoration certified and board certified as a clinical specialist in orthopedic physical therapy. She specializes in treating orthopedic and sports-related injuries. For 20 years, she's been a small business owner right here in Coppell and has been a chamber member. She's a wealth of information on physical medicine, body mechanics, breathing, mind-body-heart connection, and honestly, just about anything. I've yet to have a conversation with Amy where she wasn't knowledgeable about a certain area. So a few weeks ago, she and I were chatting about COVID-19 and just how it's been impacting all of us in so many ways, like living in this chronic state of stress and sitting more. And being a PT, she's usually on her feet. And she shared how she's been experiencing a work style lately that's more like what most of us that are tied to a desk live with. And just a 2-3 minute sidebar conversation that she and I had caused me to change the way I do some of the things in my work style. She actually said sitting is kind of the smoking of our generation. And after seeing just a couple of those little changes, Ellie and I talked about it and said, we've got to share this with the world. So we will spend some time with Amy talking you through some different strategies for working healthier in this current situation that we're in. We will save time at the end to ask questions. So you can go ahead and whenever you're ready, start throwing those in the chat and I'll hang on to them and bring them up when it's time. And so with that, Amy, I would love for you to start with if you can talk about how sitting affects our body and some of the strategies that you recommend to change that.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Before I get going, I want to acknowledge Ellie and her team at the Coppell Chamber, Amanda, and the board, and just as a small business owner going through this COVID-19 scenario that we've all gone through, to know that you guys were on our team, you were behind us, constantly throwing good information our way. And, there were times where it was scary. What's my business going to look like, or what's this going to look like? And just to know that you guys were there and were on it, just was a kind of like having a, comforting. And so just appreciate all that you all have done to keep us going. And Ellie was sharing with me yesterday that she was at the Richardson Chamber when 9/11 happened. And so she's kind of been through this before and knew how to lead us through it. And I really felt that presence personally and with my business. So I just appreciate all that you guys do and have done recently. And just appreciate the opportunity to be online with you all today. I think Amanda and I's conversation a couple weeks ago, I was talking about, as a physical therapist, I've been a PT for 20 years. I'm on my feet all day long, every day. But when during COVID and the shelter in place, and we weren't seeing patients, I found myself on my computer, on my laptop, in places, sitting at my bar at home, or just sitting in the chair here at the office, and webinars and reading email updates. And, we were kind of having to stay on top of all that. And I realized just like my back was hurting. I was going to bed at night, I couldn't get comfortable. And I was like, wow, this sitting is not good. And then I realized, you know, I tell my patients that all the time, but having experienced it, it really made me realize just how bad sitting is. And I think, you know, our bodies were meant to move. And so, yes, we live in a world where we have to sit a lot. And so what can we do to combat that? And so, you know, one of the things that I was thinking about the other day, if you think about our diaphragms, we have a right diaphragm and we have a left diaphragm, and it lives up here in our chest. And the right diaphragm and the left diaphragm wants to pump. Okay, so your diaphragm is like, it's like a pressure gradient. It's a pump producing a pressure gradient, and that creates a cycle. We have a breathing cycle, and we have lots of these cycles in our body. So we have a gait cycle when we're walking. So when we're in right stance, our left leg is in swing, and then we go into left stance and our right goes into swing, and that's called the gait cycle. Our ankles have a cycle. So our ankles pronate, one's pronating and the other one's supinating, and then that reverses out. The other one pronates and the other one to go through life. When we chew, our mandible, we have a cycle that we chew with, our mandible. We have a nasal cycle. So we have one part of our nose that swells and the other one's, you know, not, and then it will switch to the other side. So we have these, anything that's biological has cycles. And so we need these cycles. And when I say cycle, you can think about like an infinity sign. So we need to be able to cycle to the left, go through the middle and to the right, and then back to the middle, and be able to go right to left and up and down. And so that cycling is, when we're sitting all day, we're not doing that cycling. So just one simple thing, the act of getting up creates a pressure gradient and creates a cycle. Just the idea of, and I always say like lots of little, so getting up on a regular basis. And when you're doing, you know, think about, okay, I'm moving my body, I'm cycling it from right to left and up and down when I get up. And so that was just one kind of the beginning of our conversation that Amanda and I had. And
it was super helpful to me. I, as you can now tell, have been standing since Amy and I had that conversation. So, Amy, I also really appreciated your insight in sort of this state of fight or flight that we already live in, and then you sharing how it's been compounded by COVID-19. So can you talk a little bit about that and then what we can do to undo some of that?
Yeah, so to piggyback off kind of where I just left off, the reason that cycling is so important, if we're not cycling, so you can think about a couple of different scenarios. A lot of people, when they think about posture, when you say the word posture and sitting, the first thing you do is sit upright. We see posters about slouch sitting and looking down, and yes, there's a lot of that going on. We're all looking down at devices. We've heard that a million times. But one of the problems that I see a lot of is we've now overcorrected our posture. If you think about, especially like if you're trying to make a point and you raise up, pelvis dumps forward, then that lifts reach. And when you lift your rib cage, the diaphragms that attach to that rib cage, they turn on. So it's almost like you've gone. So if you do it now, think about taking a deep breath. So everyone take a deep breath. So when you take a deep breath in, your rib cage lifts, and we tend to, if we overcorrect our posture, we stay there, we lose that pumping we lose the pump of our diaphragm. Okay, then begin to go into a neck breathing pattern, because in order to get air in, we have to lift our chest now. And now we're using muscles that attach to our head and our sternum to try to lift to get air in instead of pumping to get air in. And so when we go into that inhaled position and we stay there all day long, we're never getting a full exhale. It's like we're breathing with about a fifth of our lungs. And so then we do the shallow breathing with our neck, and we never get a full exhale. And then we go into a state called hyperventilation. And you can have anxiety and go into an acute hyperventilation attack where you have to like breathe into a bag and try to get your breath again. But you can also live in chronic hyperinflation. So where this state of where you're in this shallow breathing pattern and you never exhale. And some of the symptoms that are a result of that it puts you in your sympathetic nervous system. So we have our autonomic nervous system, we have our sympathetic nervous system, we have our parasympathetic nervous system, and to be balanced out. Now, every now and then, when we have to fight, flight, or flee, okay, we have to go into our sympathetic nervous system, but then we should be able to come back out of that and kind of live in a balanced position. And what happens when we live in that hyperinflated, shallow breathing pattern, we begin to live here in our sympathetic nervous system. And now we more predisposed to pain. So our pain threshold actually go down. We become more sensitive to lights and sounds, prone to headaches. We can have more anxiety, so that causes more anxiety, catastrophic thinking, and then all kinds of physiological symptoms. Like you can start to get gut can start to vasoconstrict. So think about like irritable bowel syndrome and things like that, numbness and tingling in your hands. And so this idea of, your posture being linked to this never being able to get a full exhale and living in your chronic hyperventilation, that can feed a lot of anxiety and so one of the best things you can do, a lot of people will say, well, if you're hyperventilated or if you have a lot of anxiety, breath. And the problem with that, a lot of people will go to take their deep breath, but really what we need to do is focus on the exhale. So when you breathe in, then now take a full deep breath out. That's parasympathetic. So inhale in is sympathetic nervous system. I'm up, I'm ready to go. Exhale, parasympathetic. Let's come back down, let's rest, let's relax, let's restore. And so we got to find that balance in our breathing as well.
And Amy, I think you shared an app with me. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, and I'll put it in the chat box?
Yes. So the other thing that kind of goes with this state of kind of chronic hyperventilation is we tend to, let's say we're faced with a stressful situation, like let's say COVID-19, let's say a pandemic. And, it was humbling for me because I thought that I had like this stress and all this stuff under control with all this knowledge about breathing and all this stuff. And again, humbling, I just found myself like anxiety driven, breathing up in my neck and my chest, and had anxiety. And then you become tense. Like if there's tension in your autonomic nervous system, there's tone in your central nervous system and in your muscles and all that. And so I found myself there. I could hardly get like a deep breath. I was very shallow breathing. And so you can take, then you add anxiety to this shallow breathing pattern. And now you become, I was like, you can become hijacked by your stress. You know, just to say, a lot of these references that I'm getting are from the Postural Restoration Institute, and then the Heart Math Institute. The Heart Math Institute studies the heart. So there's a heart-brain connection, and there are as many hormones going from the heart to the brain to control the brain. And so they talk about, so this stress reaction, now you become not only hyperventilated, but you become hypervigilant as well. And so how do we do to, you know, regain control of all that? And so one of the Heart Math Institute, what they talk about is like that idea of breathing attitude, and breathing from your heart. And a real simple thing, and I always like to say with these kinds of things, you know, I was talking to Amanda, and you have to have a low barrier to entry with all these things. If there's one small barrier that gets your way, you're not going to implement these. So I always like to find simple things that you can do while you're at your desk if you have to. And one analogy, and this was from a podcast, a Heart Math podcast that I think Amanda's going to post later this week. Think about my BFF, about breath. So focusing on your breath, and then feeling a positive, you know, gratitude, and then focusing on your breath. So there is an app called the Breathing Zone app, and it's free. It's a free download, and all it is a paced breather. So you can set the settings on it, and if you breathe at a pace of 5 breaths per minute, so that's 5 seconds in, and then 5 seconds out. We'll exhale 5 seconds in, and this pacer will take you through that. It'll tell you to breathe in, and then it'll breathe out. And if you can practice that paced breathing, that's called resonance frequency breathing. And that's been shown to bring your sympathetic nervous system down. And you can practice it. It's kind of recommended. The idea is you would start with maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and then try to do a slow build up to about 10 minutes. And a great time to do this is at night when you're laying in bed. So I had my nieces and nephew this weekend, and my nephew would, you know, lay in bed and watch and play these like first person shooter games. And I was thinking, oh, that's just not a good way to go to bed. But so thinking about laying in bed and focus on your breath and breathe, and try to think about breathing in through your nose for a count of 5, out through your mouth for a count of 5 for resonance frequency breathing. That'll bring your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system into balance, and that's called coherence. And when you're in a state of coherence, you feel it. Like you'll feel more relaxed, you have more mental clarity, you can focus better, and you're more resilient, you can handle stress better. And so just this focusing on your breath, and then just feeling a positive emotion. So I always like to say, it's not good enough to know that you're supposed to be grateful, but to really experience and feel gratefulness in your heart. And that can be as simple as when you're washing your hands, like we're all having to do a million times a day. Think about being grateful for the warm water that's on your hands. Just bringing yourself into the present for 20 seconds while you're washing your hands, being grateful for the warm water that's hitting your hands, or being grateful. You can be grateful, I think, for that new book that you just ordered and you're excited to read. For the Coppell Chamber, for that are on your side, during a pandemic, like just there's a million things to be grateful for. And so that experiencing and the feeling of gratitude. And then the last focus, and focusing on your breath is great. Because that can bring you, when this is stuff that you're actually, when you're practicing this, you're building up reserves. And then later in the day, when you're in that meeting, you're able to focus more. You're able to be present, focus, because you've practiced it. So these are reserves that you can bring with you throughout your day.
I love that. So, Amy, one thing that came through in the chat, and I think it couples with something else you talked to me about, was when we are at our desk and we're tied to our desk, what can we do throughout the day? And the specific question in the chat is about standing. Like, what ratio of standing to sitting do you recommend? And then are there stretches you can do? Like, if I'm tied to Zoom, but I can move a little bit, what do you recommend?
Yes, so definitely. So think about, that's a great question, because if you're sitting at your desk and your back is into a chair, okay, that part of your back is not able to get air in. So now you're putting air in the front, and you're just kind of exacerbating that lifted chest posture, and your low back is tight. So one of the things, I think Amanda's going to post she's going to, I have handouts of them.
Yeah, I'll add them right now.
So you can do this sitting or standing. But what you'll do is you'll scoot away from the back of your chair. You'll put your hands on your desk, and then with your elbows straight, and think about when you're going to push through your hands as you inhale and try to get air into your back. So you're thinking about expanding your back and getting air into your back. That is so important, because that area of your back is called the posterior mediastinum. And I know that's a big word, but that's the highway of life, because that's where your descending aorta lives. That's where your azygous vein, your thoracic, so think your lymphatic ducts, your thoracic lymphatic drainage, your esophagus is back there, and your sympathetic nervous chain. So if you think about, if all that's tight, that highway of life is being compressed and tight, that has all kinds of repercussions. Like we can think about GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. So this idea of pushing with your hands and trying to open up your back, so you're going to try to breathe into your back, and you want to do it without lifting with your shoulder. So you're pushing into your hands. You inhale, you're putting your back. So you're not lifting to get air in, you're expanding to get air in. And you can do that whether you're sitting, or you can do that in standing. The other thing I would say, as far as like your ratio to sit to stand, I don't know if I've seen a recommended ratio. I'm sure there is one. But what I like to say again is lots of little. So a lot of micro breaks throughout the day. So that can be sitting and doing that breathing exercise, that stretch into your back. It can be standing. Maybe you have a desk where you can adjust it up or down. So maybe, the first couple hours in the morning, you're going to stand for a while. Or just that, take the opportunity to take a break and walk and go get, your water bottle filled up or whatever. I have my Apple Watch, and it runs my life sometimes, but like I have this, setting, it'll say it's time to stand up, and I always do that. I always try to do that as much as possible. So I say lots of like little micro breaks throughout your day.
Awesome. Okay, Amy, a question came in about as we're moving more, what kind of footwear do you wear at home if you're going to be standing and running around?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing for me as a physical therapist with my patients, because I know how important the proper shoe for your foot is. You have to have that proper foundation. And that's one of the first things that we look at when you come here is we watch you walk, and we watch how you're loading, and we make sure that you have the right shoes for your feet. So we're doing that a lot, and a lot of times we're asking our patients to go out and invest in a usually expensive pair of shoes, knowing that, hey, that's important. Especially how, if you think about that's your foundation, and you're going to organize yourself from the ground up. So even our TMJ patients that come in, we're looking at their feet and making sure, hey, they have a good foundation. So that and shoes are what we do, but understanding that a lot of times, when you're at home, you don't be in your tennis shoes. And so, that idea of trying to be like, if you are going to go for a walk or be on your feet for a prolonged period of time, like working in the yard or whatever, yes, you can be in your shoes. And I'm seeing a note here pop up about Vionics and fit flops. And not all flip flops are equal. There is a brand called Fit Flops, and I think there's more out there now, in the Vionics, and some of them that being flip flops, especially in the summer when it's hot, finding a pair that is going to support your foot, and making sure that we're controlling that foot, because remember, going back to the cycles, your foot is pronating, your ankle is pronating. And if you're over pronating, on one side, then that can up the kinetic chain. So making sure that when you're at home and you don't want to be in your tennis shoes, then trying to be, I think Vionics and Fit Flops are great options. Anything that's going to be a little bit supportive, usually in the arch, is a good thing.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Here's a question from Vicki. But with COVID potentially out there for anyone, she would think that getting our breathing in shape gives us an advantage with any virus that attacks our respiratory system. So she wants to know how we can work on now skills that would help us if we get this. And I'm going to give the disclaimer as a healthcare operations person that anything Amy says is just a general guidance and is not medical advice.
Right. But I love this question, because I've thought about this a million times about the patients that have ended up with COVID and have ended up in the hospital on a ventilator. And what's interesting to watch this from a postural restoration certified therapist perspective, and when we're putting our hands on our patients' thoraxes all day long to help them breathe and get out that extra air and all that stuff to restore normal pumping mechanisms of the diaphragm. That's foundational. And so this idea of that exercise that I showed you, where you're breathing into your back and open up your posterior mediastinum, that's going to facilitate drainage. So a lot of these COVID patients, the ones that are on ventilators, they'll spend maybe 5 or 6 hours a day on a ventilator, and then they roll them onto their stomach. They roll them prone positioning, to facilitate drainage of their lungs and perfusion. And so this idea that, hey, this is stuff we can be doing on a regular basis, day in and day out, to facilitate drainage. And if you, in a weird sort of way, if you do this exercise, it's almost like you're going prone because you're facilitating opening up that back area where we need drainage, we need perfusion, blood flow, oxygen, all of that gets tight. And then think about a thorax that's not cycling, and we're not getting that drainage, we're not getting that perfusion, that pump, that air, that oxygen. And so I love that question because I do think there is a link, and I do think there are things that we can be doing right now to put ourselves in a better place, respiration wise, lung wise, posture wise, that can keep us from, you know, heaven forbid, if we ever go there, we have a better chance of surviving it, I think.
Awesome. Thank you. That also felt really good on my back. I swear I felt some things pop.
Yeah.
Ernesto has a great question here. Is low back pain associated with bad posture while sitting, bad mattress, or both?
I would say it can be both. So with sitting, a lot of times we blame for low back pain. But you know, we think about a lot of times you'll hear, like, I'll have patients that come in, they're like, yeah, I had to sit all day in a meeting, and then I bent forward to pick up that paper clip off the floor and my back went out. And so we blame sitting, we blame forward bending for a lot of our low back pain, when in reality, it's because of, if you think about, if your ribs are lifted and your back is always in a shortened on position, you're sitting there with constant compression and loading in your spine. And so you tend to get little cracks in your disc in the back. And so what happens is you have that constant compression and loading, and you get that little crack in your disc. Then you go to bend forward, and the jelly in the jelly donut, the nucleus, squirts out through that crack and becomes a herniated disc. So we blame flexion, we blame the motion that caused herniated disc, but it's really the postural overcorrection, almost, this flared ribs, pelvis dumped forward, low back always on, constant compression and load, that is really the source of the pain. And so, so yes, I think having that awareness in sitting, I think, again, this idea of our bodies were meant to move. And so if you do find yourself sitting a lot, you can adjust that up and down, getting up and down as much as you can, making sure you're not overcorrecting your posture, but also not slouching. So thinking about, if I was to sit, I would want my ribs, my rib cage, stacked over my pelvis. That should be one cone or one cylinder. So my ribs shouldn't be in front, and they shouldn't be slouched behind. And so this idea of kind of this neutral posture. And then as far as a mattress goes, yeah, they have, you know, the Sleep Number beds now. It's great because, you know, some people's bodies, some people's thorax. So if you think you have, let's take a really flexible gymnast that has a really flexible thorax. Okay. They may need something that's a little firmer, versus if you take someone down and they have a really rigid thorax because they haven't been moving or what have you, they may need something that's a little softer. And so to answer that question about the mattress, it's highly variable. So there's some problem solving that goes along with that. And most of the time, what I get from patients is they'll come in and they'll say, well, was on vacation and I slept in a really soft bed and I came back and I was hurting so bad. Or they'll say, went on vacation and I slept in a different bed and I slept great. So then we start to say, okay, maybe your mattress is contributing. So then we kind of problem shoot that and figure out, okay, what position are you sleeping in? Maybe we need to change the position that you're sleeping in, onto your side or something like that. Pillows, so we can problem solve that.
Amy, and this comes from someone that unlearned a lot of things with you, Vicky. She wants to know, how do people know when they need to adjust their posture? How do they know if they need to overcorrect?
So I say just that when you're, okay, let's take the sitting posture, for example. Okay. You want to be in a position, you want to be in a chair that allows your feet to touch the floor. So you want to be grounded on the floor, because when your feet aren't grounded on that floor, what you're going to do is you're going to dump your pelvis forward. And when your pelvis dumps forward, your ribs are obliged to tip up. And now you become overcorrected. And then versus just the opposite, where your is rolled back and you're slouched. So one of the things that I like to do is if you're sitting in your chair and your feet aren't touching the ground, make sure that you can bring the ground up to your feet. So either something like a footrest underneath, or lower your chair. And then your elbows should be bent to a 90-degree angle, and you should be able to reach your keyboard, like stressing or having to lift your shoulders like that. So then one of the things that you can do to see if you're in neutral posture is, I always like to say overcorrect. So go way, 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 way forward, go to your end range where you're dumping your pelvis forward. Then go to your end range where you're dumping your pelvis all the way back. Okay, so find out where that range of motion is. Now go all the way forward again. And now bring your pelvis back and bring it back just a little bit more. And that's usually kind of where your neutral is. And again, you want to think about your rib cage stacked over your pelvis. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And then in standing, one of the things that I see a lot is people will stand with their knees locked out. So their knees are locked out because they have the mobility. So they lock their knees out, and then their pelvis has to downward, and then they're hanging in their back all day. And they're just kind of hanging passively on their passive restraint system. They're not using their core or feeling the ground underneath their feet to push against, to hold themselves up. So this idea of if you can soften your knees just a little bit when you're standing. And then I always like to say, bring your right foot slightly in front of your left foot, because as human beings, we really like to overload into our right side, and a lot of times we get stuck on our right side. So if you put your right foot slightly in front of your left foot, and then shift your weight over into your left heel. So now your weight is shifted over your left side. Kind of drop your left shoulder, tuck your bottom up underneath you. And then it's a lot harder to lock out. And your pelvis isn't dumped and you're not hanging on your passive restraint system.
Oh, that's a good tip. That felt like taking an Advil. Okay, I've got 2 more questions, and then if there's any others, just stick them in the chat and we'll roll through them. So, Amy, what do you do in your personal life, both during normal times and during COVID-19, to stay well and to feel good?
Did you say
to stay well and to feel good?
Great question. So I try to incorporate this idea of your body wants to move. And so I used to be a runner. I used to run all day long every day, like just, but then my body starts, okay, you need to kind of mix it up a little bit. And so it's kind of interesting because I think you and I, Amanda, have talked about this, but when I started to get close to the age of 50, I realized that I had kind of lost some of the joy in life. I wasn't depressed, but things were too serious. You know, it was like, I had a joyful childhood. Thanks, Mom. But not too serious, you know? And so I decided to start to incorporate some things that I preach. And I started to think about in my childhood, what brought me joy. And it was 3 simple things I incorporated in. One was music. I love music. Like, I love all kinds of music. And I love learning new music and hearing new music. And so I turned off NPR, turned on my music, and I started listening to my music. My Pandora premium station is my kind of guilty pleasure. No one better take that away from me. And then fitness. I've always been fit. I played sports growing up. And so my fitness had kind of slowly started to kind of diminish, you know, where I was like getting 10 minutes in here, or 15 minutes in there. And so I decided, you know, I'm going to commit myself back to my fitness because I always feel better. And so I try to, as far as it goes, I try to do a variety of things. You know, I do a little bit of cycling. I can get outside and cycle. I'll get on my bike, or running, preferably outdoors again. And then I'll do maybe one like strength training session a week. And then I'll do one hot yoga session a week. And really the hot yoga thing for me was what kind of set all this off as far as like feeling good, because I would go to hot yoga and I'd walk out of there and I'd be like, that felt so good, but I didn't really know why. And what I realized is that, you know, when they say, don't let your mind leave your mat for an hour, focus on your breathing and what you're feeling in your body for an hour, it's so powerful. And I realized what I was feeling was that state of coherence, where I had my sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system was balanced. And I would, on the day I would do hot yoga and I'd go be with my patients, I just had a more fulfilling day as a clinician because I was calmer, I was less stressed, I was more present with my patients, I had more mental clarity, you know, and I just felt better and I could give more to my patients, and that was very rewarding. So then as I started to learn about, okay, this autonomic nervous system and balancing the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and then posture and how your posture plays a part into all that. So trying to incorporate fitness. And then the third thing was sun. So my family, we are sun worshipers. My mom will attest to that. If I could live on a beach, I would. And I think we've gotten a little bit scared of the sun. And, you know, I go to my dermatologist every year, and I wear sunscreen, but sun is so therapeutic for me. And so those were just 3 like simple things that I could incorporate into my life that brought me joy and made me feel better and more relaxed, and able to take on, you know, what was coming my way.
Awesome. And with the exception of maybe hot yoga, which is probably coming back, sounds like we could actually be doing all of those right now.
Yeah, you know, the weird thing about this whole COVID thing has been, there's been beauty in it too, right?
Absolutely.
There's been death, but there's also been resurrection. Like I have seen more people outside. I've seen people outside fishing. I've seen them taking walks with family, riding their bikes. One of my friends who's a PT out in California, all of her patients now are patients that have had accidents on their bicycles because they're back on their bikes again. You know what I mean? And And that's wonderful. And I thought, oh, this is what it was like growing up in the late 70s and early 80s as a child when we were outside all day long. And we were unscheduled. We had nowhere to go. And so there's been some beauty in all of this, going back to kind of that unhurried, unscheduled time and thinking about how do I preserve that now going forward, you know, and really being vigilant with my schedule and becoming overscheduled again, you know.
Yes, I'm going to try that one very hard.
I know it's hard.
It is.
It's a hard thing to do.
So we have a question from Layla, which welcome back, Layla. We've missed you. Layla says she is working on adding stretching every morning to her routine, and she wants to know, Amy, do you have a favorite stretch that you find really helps neck pain, or is there a good stretch that we should all incorporate into our daily lives?
Let's see. I think so a lot of neck pain comes from like the over breathing and being up our neck all day long every day, 22,000 times a day. If you think about it, we're trying to pull air in with our neck. And so one of the best things you can do is think about being grounded. And so the exercise in standing, the one I showed in sitting, but you can also do it in standing, where you're pushing and getting back into your heels and getting your rib cage down and pushing through your hands without, and then learning to breathe again without lifting. So you're not doing this, your shoulders are staying level, and then you're breathing into your back and you're expanding and breathing. And then, yes, there's a foam roll routine that I really like. We call it our foam roll posture routine. And I can post that for you. But it's a series of stretches that we do laying on the foam roll lengthwise. So you be on it lengthwise on your back with your knees bent. And then you want to make sure that when you're on the foam roll, I shouldn't be able to come in and put my hand underneath your back. You've got that foam roll. Does that make sense? So you're rolled back and your ribs have to come down while you're on that foam roll, even if it means your arms. And then you're going to do some movements with your arms, like overhead, out to a T, up to a clap. You can do some alternating arm crisscrosses, bench presses, crossovers, all while you're on that foam roll, maintaining that neutral posture. So what that's doing is it's activating your core in a neutral posture position. Okay, so you're maintaining that even if your arms don't go as far overhead. If you're having ribs to get your arms all the way down, that's no good. We want to keep the ribs down and the pelvis underneath us as we're doing those movements, and that's going to loosen the thoracic spine. So that loosens the thoracic spine. So now we have better mobility in our thoracic spine. So now we're not having to overuse our neck because we don't have mobility in our thoracic spine. Same thing with like rotator cuff surgeries. A lot of times you'll see people have rotator cuff injuries or surgeries. They, if they didn't have an accident that caused it, but they had more of a kind of a chronic degenerative cuff tendon problem. You'll see a lot of times a really stiff thorax that won't move and can't cycle. And now they've blown through their shoulder. Same thing. You want to loosen up your thorax so that you're not overuse your neck because your thorax is supple. And so I love that roll posture routine because it loosens up your thorax while you're having to engage your core. And you should, when you do that, think about kind of test your neck mobility before you get on it, and then go through that routine and then test it again, and you should feel more mobility in your cervical spine.
Amy, is that foam roller parallel or perpendicular to the spine in that?
It's like you're laying on it lengthwise. Like if this is the foam roll, you're laying on it. Your spine is along it like that. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thanks. All right, we have 2 questions. I think we can cover them in 8 minutes, so I'm going to talk fast. Maddie is trying to teach herself to sleep on her back. It's not going well. She wants to know if you have any advice. I'm particularly curious because the aesthetic people have always said sleep on your back, and most of the musculoskeletal people say sleep on your side. So what do you think, Amy?
Oh, that's interesting because so there can be so many factors that can limit someone from sleeping on their back. The first one that comes to mind for me is so a lot of times if you're not tolerating sleeping on your back, then sometimes it's your airway is obstructed. And that can be from a lot of different reasons. When we lay down, our mandible, when we relax and our mandible actually retrude, that can actually, cause an obstruction of our airway. So I'm not trying to diagnose airway obstruction here, but just saying there can be multiple factors as to why not tolerating the supine position or on your back. And a lot of times it does have to do with your airway. And so we work closely with some dentists here in town, and we do some like dental integration where we can start to tease some of that out if we have to. You can't, and then the other thing I would say is your pillow. So you want to be able to cycle, right? You have to be able to cycle when you're sleeping. So some people will, they'll kind of like, well, I use this pillow and it's firm and it holds my neck in one position all night. And I'm like, well, it's probably not great because we have to be able to move and shift, right? That's our body trying to cycle. And so I always recommend a small, thin feather pillow, one pillow. But you can kind of play with pillows sometimes if you're trying to sleep on your back. But there's nothing wrong with sleeping on your side either. And so we have recommendations, as that goes as well. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think so. Did she answer it, Maddie? Okay, and then last question. We've been hearing a lot lately about patients delaying care because they're afraid of COVID-19. And so specifically to some of the things that you're talking about, Amy, where's that line and what should patients look for in let me just take care of this at home and try changing out the way I'm doing things versus I need to call my doctor or I need to see a physical therapist? What are those things that we should be looking for that alert us, okay, it's time to actually seek professional help? Right,
yeah. That's a great point because we heard about people that were actually having a stroke, but they were afraid to go to the hospital. And so, you heard on the news, yes, if you're having stroke-like symptoms, yes, you need to seek medical attention. But for more like benign things, it's kind of like I had this dull ache in my back or my hip or whatever that won't go away. Just a quick little plug for physical therapy in Texas. September of last year, finally got direct access where you can come to a physical therapist now without a doctor's referral. And we can see you for 10 days before you have to go to a doctor. And so when this COVID thing started and patients weren't able to get out or they didn't want to get out, I was my team here, we're healthcare providers. We have a obligation to our patients. And if we can keep someone that has back pain out of the emergency room right now to offload an already burdened, healthcare system, that's our role. And so, I would say if you have continued nagging neck, shoulder, back, hip, knee pain that's not going away. And I always like to say, you're not getting better after a week or two, or it's affecting your quality of life, like you're not able to get a good night's sleep or what have you, then it's a musculoskeletal pain. Then a physical therapist can see you. We're trained to rule out red flags and to identify things that need to be referred on for medical care. But otherwise, we can start therapy, and we can initiate it and hopefully keep you from having to escalate into more testing and all that stuff. Yeah, just if you need us, we're here for that.
Okay, awesome. Well, Amy, thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. Most of the handouts I shared in the chat, but also keep an eye on the Chamber's social media. We've got scheduled out over, I think, the next 7 days, some additional resources from Amy, a couple of podcasts, some of her handouts, and I can tell you everything I've ever read that Amy sent me is really, really, really good. So definitely keep an eye out for those. And we hope to see you guys at the next wellness series. And again, Amy, thank you for kicking this off for us. It was fantastic as always.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda and Ellie and everybody and thank you so much.
Yeah. Pam, Ellie, Layla, any closing remarks?
I don't have anything right now other than that was some really good information. As y'all noticed while she was talking, I'm now standing up again.
Yay!
And I put on tennis shoes. I will say yesterday I stood up all day and I didn't even think about it. I was working at my desk and I was standing up all day long. I sat down long enough to eat, but I'm very fortunate. I have a Veridesk. We all have Veridesk here at our office. And so I stood up and didn't even pay attention to it. My feet hurt so bad last night. So today I have my tennis shoes. I wore my heels, but I got my tennis shoes on today. And it really did make a difference. I slept like a rock, but my feet hurt. So don't make that. I got caught up in my work and didn't even think about it. I was just working and working on my breathing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's a great little tip, like just to have your tennis shoes underneath your desk.
mm-hmm.
When you're in your heels, flip them off. But if you have to go to a meeting, put them on. So that's a great little tip.
Yeah. So Amanda and I were fortunate we had a preview with you yesterday, and so I was doing all my work.
I love it.
Thank you so much. Anything you need to add, Amanda?
Nope, all good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you
So much.